Thank you for joining the left of interview in TAVR session. And this session is a wonderful session. We invited a world-renowned expert in TAVR field. I'm D.W. Park from Assam Medical Center, co-moderator Samir Kapadia from US. I'm going to introduce the father of TAVR and the Alain Cribier and the Eberhard Grube and Bapat.
Thank you very much. First of all, great to have you all here, and I'm also excited to be here. Maybe I start with Dr. Cribier to say that when you started the TAVR, did you imagine that in your professional career you will see the success that you saw now?
Well, actually, as you can realize, it has been for me absolutely amazing. It has been a succession of good surprise all the time during 20 years, without any disappointment, discouragement. It has been a real great success. And the first case, I was asked, how do you see the future? I thought that maybe we will be able to do this procedure in patients, with very high risk, non-operable candidates and so on. But I must say, to finish, that my first series of patients done on compassionate basis, the worst patients that you can imagine on cardiac catheterization table, improved so much, that I realized that probably it would be a successful story. And I was not disappointed.
So what about you?
I have to add one more thing, because it really what this story told us or tells us is it is not the companies, it is the individual that drives these innovations forward. As he said, no company was ready to fund this. No, everybody thought it was a crazy idea. The persistence, the resilience that Alain had was driving it forward. And that is something that is very important today. If we look for funding, sometimes it is very, very difficult to pursue your goals. But I think you have to maintain this goal. Otherwise, there will be no progress.
And just to ask you the question, the follow-up question, that when Dr. Cribier started the first valve and you were pioneering the second valve testing, what was your thinking that how would it work? The two valves, and what is the...
So, thank you for that question, actually. There's an official version that I could answer, but there's also how it really happened. And I was aware of Alain's and the PVT group, and it was quite interesting when Jacques Seguin was talking to me about his ideas. I received a telephone call from New York by a very famous physician, and the abbreviation is MBL. He called me and said, Eberhard, next to Alain, why don't you join the PVT group together? And I said, I'm humbled, and I was a little bit intimidated by this telephone.
You're right. Yeah. You better.
I was intimidated because I was younger, and you receive a phone call. But my thoughts were a little bit different. And my thoughts were not exactly what he had in mind, because he was basically talking to me with his ideas, or their ideas, to be fair, and I had some different opinions together with Jacques. So, basically, and I think that's the beauty of this technology, you have two entirely different designs, two different approaches, and still basically the same success. And that's why I think what my dear friend Vinny said about so many valves that are coming up, that none of them works, unlike the mitral valve, it really is a proof of concept across the board. So we can be very proud of it.
So this leads to the question to Vinny, that as a surgeon, when you had the transapical, this was your initial contribution to say that how we deploy the valve. Dr. Cribier started with the transeptal approach, and then Edwards and John Webb started the transfemoral approach, and then came the transapical one. What was your thinking, that where is this technology and how you embrace a new technology that is going to disrupt the things that you are doing, or this is bread and butter of surgery?
So I got involved in 2007 by accident because all the surgeons, senior surgeons, thought this technology is never going to win. So let's assign the youngest surgeon for this technology. I was fascinated by it, and thanks to the leaders here who were sitting next to me. And I always believed that although most surgical community kept saying transapical is better and we can do it in 80% of patients, I really believed, with my interactions with cardiologists that this is going to be less invasive sooner or later. And that's why I designed the transaortic approach, less morbid to the patients. And I think the thinking changed. I learned a lot that less invasive way is the best way to do it. And we have seen that in last 12 years. It's awake, minimalistic approach, and most patients get work. So I think I'm happy that I got involved. I would also like to add what you asked Eberhard, is the evolution of core valve was not evolution of core valve, aortic valve, but we started using nitinol. And that nitinol has been our friend now for mitral and tricuspid technologies. So I think we have learned a lot because of both the platforms for other therapies as well.
So I have one question to Alain Cribier. I think a TAVR story somewhat resembles left main PCI. When SJ performed the first left main case nearly 1994, 1995, all of a cardiac surgeon, are you crazy? Are you crazy, man? There is many obstacles, very resistant cardiac surgeon. I think Alain and you shows the very nice lecture, your legacy effect and your long life success history of the TAVR. How can you manage? How can you handle cardiac surgeon resistant at the initial time when you do some first series of the TAVR case?
Well, I'm sorry because I'm not sure that I understood completely.
So the question is that how did you handle the resistance from cardiac surgery when you tried to do this thing, because it is like left main PCI.
Well, actually, yes, I answer the question. It was a very difficult fight for me, difficult time, because, when you have an idea, when you are sure that you have a good idea, when you bring the concept that it will work, because we had this post-mortem autopsy specimen, that we did in Rouen. And when you have the fierce opposition of every surgeon, I didn't have any encouragement, never, So you have to have special mind. You have to be specially minded, to survive this, and not to quit and say, well, they are right, they are. All the world is against me, and I should stop. You have to persevere. There is one real key word, for all the people who wants to do some innovative technology, especially in medicine. They have to persevere and never be discouraged. And especially if they are profoundly sure that the idea is good, and will save life. You have to persevere. So I did persevere, and I had this story. When I came for the first transapical case in Leipzig, it was something very strange, because the surgeons for the first time were manipulating the valve and implanting it transapical, and I saw in their eyes, that something was happening. And I left the place saying that, well, okay, it will work. Now I will be quite peaceful with them. And it was true, It was a real change in their thinking.
So what are the challenges now? So what are the ways we can, I know that this is a broad question, but the idea is that how can TAVR be better?
Well, I think, as been shown in various presentations today, we started out with procedural metric. I mean, we wanted to make sure that the procedure is safe. We're looking at mortality, complications, and we tried to make this new approach safe and effective. The battle that we had to start, and even today you hear it, is the question where you don't have enough data to promote the durability. So once we have secured the safety of the procedure, now we're looking at something different. We're looking more forward, going into lower risk patients. and possibly at some point into younger patients. Now, I'm pretty restrictive on the whether you're going to be 70 or 65. It's a decision between surgeons and intervention. But we're looking at today at lifetime, what's called lifetime management or life journey, and which is a totally different thing than procedural metrics. It's hemodynamic metrics. It's data-driven by durability, and that's the beauty. There's no fooling around anymore. We have randomized data against surgery. I am not afraid of head-to-head trials between technologies. The problem with head-to-head trials is there's always a bias. And I think, if we compare a balloon expander and self-expanding versus surgery, that's the way we move this forward. And now we have those data. Obviously not 10 years, but at least with the first generation, we have 8 years. Now with Notion, 10 years soon. So I think that's the metric that we have to look into. How can we approach younger patients with less invasive means?
So, Vinny, the question is that the durability obviously comes with time. That, you have to follow people. And by the time you follow people, you will have a new generation valve. So you say, okay, forget about that valve. Now, let's start the clock again. Solution to that would be to find a surrogate, find a method to be able to tell from a short follow-up with some kind of either artificial intelligence, some kind of motion of the valve, some kind of blood flow to the valve, some kind of a surrogate to say that this valve is going to last longer. Is there something on the horizon that can happen like that? Or it is still going to be that we follow the valve for 5 or 10 years and then the data are obsolete? Just like how they say trifecta or mitral flow, they failed, but you say, okay, don't worry about it because those valves don't exist anymore, or we are not putting those valves. Or say XT, for example, that it was not very good. But what is the method? How do you see this conundrum resolve over time?
So I think our philosophy has to change now. Can we implant this safe? We have to start optimizing the valve on the table. And many times, in experienced hands like Professor Cribier, you and all here, we can do it. But if we know that if the valve's not optimized in terms of expansion, for example, it affects durability. We know that patients who have halt, which is not treated, may have durability impact. I think if we start understanding what affects that, and one thing from our group, we have shown very clearly that deformation of the valve affects halt as well as it is an indirect surrogate to durability. Now we are thinking using AI now that which are the morphologies where can we predict more deformation, and that's the way to treat it. I think we have to get forward in thinking, if this is the anatomy, this is on the CT, this is the valve I will choose, how do I optimize the expansion of the valve? That's just one example. But I think durability will come with time. The other important thing is lifetime management, and we can't forget
If I can say something, I think this is very optimistic to say that the computer will predict the durability of a valve. I don't believe that too much. And when you say, for example, that you can predict in advance, if the valve will work because of the circumference and so on, it's good. But look, the surgeons, they implanted a number of bioprostheses, and it was ideal prosthesis for each patient. It was perfectly round, the hemodynamic was perfect, and nevertheless, you had very bad surprises in the follow-up. Some patients had a dysfunction, some others didn't have. And I think we are in the same situation. We cannot really predict. And as you said, generation after generation, we are dealing with new valves, so we'll have to wait and to be patient. And this is a good reason to be very cautious when we are proposing TAVI today to younger patients. I am myself very much concerned about that, because we are fascinated by the easiness of use. Now you can implant a valve in 30 minutes, when the patient is back home one day after. So it looks like a stent-like procedure. But we do not really think of the future and what will be the situation within 6, 7, 10 years. So if we are dealing with relatively elderly patients like me, for example, You know, I accept the idea of having a valve in valve and that's it, and life has to end one day or another. So there is no problem. When you are dealing with 60 to 65-year-old patients, you know, now they refuse surgery. We have to fight, you know, to convince them to have surgery done instead of TAVR. And so we have to take our responsibilities. But I am very much concerned, you know, the third valve-in-valve procedure. Is that possible? How long will it last? And what will be the result if we ask the surgeons to do an intervention on the third valve-in-valve? You know, it will be a mess. I don't know if even if you have the capabilities of replacing 3 valves in valve procedure, not to say anything about the coronary occlusion and the problem of the progression of coronary artery disease and so on. So we have to be very cautious.
So the question is that the surgeons, for example, are getting less and less experience, so to say, with the aortic valve replacement. Average, no, it is a reality of life.
Absolutely.
Average surgeon in United States does 10 aortic valve replacement in a year, right? Is that a correct statement? 10 aortic valve replacement in a whole year.
Wow.
Right? So if you are going to give them the cases to explant and put a new, this is going to be a struggle, in my mind, to find the right people to be able to deal with the complex operations. So what do you see the future there? Because this is a serious challenge now, and it will be going to be an even bigger challenge.
So I think I wouldn't say the experience is decreasing. Our experience has become different. We are operating more complex patients. Multivalvular disease is very common. Combined procedures are very common. And our explant experience for last 5 years, a group of us are educating surgeons now how to explant valves without causing problems so that the outcomes are similar to isolated AVR. And I think that is the goal. If you understand technology, then you can face better when you explant it. The problems in the early experience is a lot of surgeons who explanted it didn't understand TAVR. So they just didn't understand how to explant and caused more damage. A lot of operations which have been reported were for endocarditis. So I think the mortality which we see today in 5 given centers which I experienced is much lower. So I think the main question going ahead is which centers should do it. Few surgeons probably should do it. So in my center, I have taught all my young surgeons to explant the valve, but we do CT planning before, and we make sure that they are guided by somebody senior to keep the mortality morbidity low. And I think that is the way to go.
But you know, it's in one center. Now the TAVR is done in 700 centers, or 750 centers in United States. So there are no 750 centers with surgery that are going to be able to handle these cases. So this is in my mind going to be a challenge.
Samir, on the other hand, the average number of TAVRs done by operators in United States is also 15 per year. So I don't trust those operators to do TAVR in TAVR with critical planning either. So we have different challenges. We can only take the next step maturely if we guide properly.
But, you know, I think that's a real issue, because U.S. is very special in many ways, because it's a big country with a lot of centers, so the individual experience is less. But if we look, for example, looking for a chair at university hospitals where you have to do complex procedures, and you look at the operation of the catalog of operations they did, you're going to be surprised. Because it's modern, you know, doing a TAVR, you know, and the heart team thing, you know, we're all working together. And when it comes down to applications, and when it comes down to how do we recruit a surgeon with experience to do complex procedures, you're left in the desert because you don't have those anymore.
Exactly.
And the problem is the heart team is a good thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all the surgeons have to do the TAVR. Because otherwise, you know, they can do it, but then they don't do what they are supposed to be doing, operate on patients. And I think that's a big problem in those countries.
I think this is a very important consideration, at
Yeah.
least in my mind.
Yeah, it is.
That is. Yeah, no, I think it was an excellent debate and talk. We really enjoyed it. Any final comments, Dr. Cribier?
No, well, just an anecdote, you know. You asked me what was my most impressive observation during these 20 years. You know, the results of Partner 1 was for me something great. You know why? Because it was a randomized trial. But in one hand, we had the best surgeons in the United States, and in the other hand, we had people who had almost no experience of TAVR. And in spite of that, you know, the results of TAVR were better. So I became very
I
optimistic
know,
at
and
that time.
the way we celebrated is Dr. Cribier played the piano in the Washington Museum.
Wow.
And he is the best pianist too, just in case you didn't know. He plays very good piano. So that was
great.
just very special when we celebrated the partner trial. if
Thank you.
remember.
Thank you very
Great,
much.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna finish and wrap up interview TAVR, and really most of audience enjoy our in-depth wrap up interview. Thank you.